Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And welcome back to Hugo and Jake. Today we're continuing our study of Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote for Chaos. If you missed our first few episodes, we talked about Jordan Peterson and how we disagree with him.
We do. We're not just going to leave you hanging. We're going to read the whole book. And today, since last time was indeed the overture, which, by the way, I heard a counter-argument. He can call it that because Jordan Peterson is an artist.
Was that something someone actually said?
Yes!
Oh.
Like, you can call it regardless of your artistry or not,
Sure.
but it's just pretentious, and that's the point. But that's fine. It was just, it's a joke, man. So this one is stand up straight with your shoulders back?
Yes, this is rule number 1, the first actual rule in the titular 12 Rules for Life.
And thus the first chapter. So let's dive right in to the very bottom, because we're going to talk about lobsters.
First chapter, Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back, is the famous Lobster chapter. Of course, if you've seen Jordan Peterson, you know that he's affiliated with lobsters. You might be wondering, why?
Where's that meme come from? It's because the first chapter of his book is about lobsters.
Yeah, basically what Jordan is going to do throughout this chapter is he's going to spell out sort of the hierarchical social structure of lobsters, and then he's going to try and say human beings operate on that same level. Therefore, if you want to succeed as an individual, you should look at lobsters and sort of what lessons you can learn from them about being a more dominant individual.
Parts of it come across as tongue-in-cheek.
Sure.
But the further it goes on, the less tongue-in-cheek it is, and the more like, no, these are direct comparisons that we can make, adding, obviously, some complexity due to how humans are versus lobsters. But, like, it's not a joke. Like, I had heard this initially and thought, okay, it's a quick metaphor. Before I read the book, it's probably just like a paragraph or something where he says, okay, lobsters have this society, whatever. And then he goes on and talks about the rest of it. No, the lobsters pervade the entire chapter. I mean, they're in the whole thing.
This is something that's going to happen several times throughout this book. This is something Jordan Peterson, people like him, do a lot, actually.
Yeah.
In this particular case, it's an appeal to the natural. And what he's doing is he's effectively saying, listen, what I'm saying about human hierarchical structures, and for instance, in the last episode we talked about the specific quote he had about how he believes that liberals and are upset about patriarchy and the hierarchical structure of society, and he says, no, have they not considered it's a meritocracy? Things are the way they are because they should be the way they are, and that hierarchy is good. So in order to defend that statement, he looks to something in nature, the specific lobster example that we're going to go into in detail, and says, look, this is model of reality that I have closely resembles this thing I can point to in nature, therefore my worldview is the correct one because I can point to a thing in nature that somewhat resembles it.
I mean, it's not even like... He doesn't even dance around it. This is a direct quote. He being a male lobster that displays dominance in this scenario, also gets all the girls. It is exponentially more worthwhile to be successful if you are a lobster and male. And then he will directly go into paragraphs about how that equally extrapolates to men. And how women will seek out that aspect solely, or primarily, and even secondarily, as their main functions for seeking a mate, companionship, whatever. And also, it has an implicit sort of procreation is the ultimate goal of every relationship behind it, which is not the case for most people. A lot of the problem I have with this chapter in general is it's very reductive about how humans operate in every facet. Later on, we'll get into some psychology, but right now, we're just socially between men and women, straight men and women, of course, heterosexual, cisgendered men and women whose relationships would often lead to procreation if Jordan Peterson had his way, or Quiverful, or whoever. That's not what people, especially now, look at. And I think that's kind of what he's bucking against, because it's anti-traditionalist to seek a partner that maybe isn't physically like superior to everyone, isn't super financially stable. You're looking for love, not status. You're looking for connection on an emotional level, not a furthering of the hierarchy that he finds so important. And while I find value in how our hierarchical structure operates at times, like there is value in trying to do your best at your job or whatever. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about it specifically in relation to, right, in this section, and later on we'll talk about more. In this section, it's about mating and acquiring, from his perspective, female attention.
Even in situations that don't extend beyond the sexual, it's still he still puts this hierarchy above everything. It's why everything in every relationship is so defined by this. For instance, this part: over the millennia, animals who must cohabitate with the others in the same territories have in consequence learned many tricks to establish dominance, while risking the least amount of possible damage. A defeated wolf, for example, will roll over on its back, exposing their throat to the victor, who will not then deign to tear it out. The now dominant wolf may still require a future hunting partner after all, even one as pathetic as his now defeated foe. I like that he also throws the pathetic in there. Fucking beta cuck wolf.
Yeah, I mean, he's using language that he knows his audience will eat up a little bit, because they see themselves as the alpha wolf. He doesn't use a wolf on accident here. If I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt at all moving forward, because as a Jordan Peterson fan, you might say, well, he just used that example because it's true. You really think Jordan Peterson isn't calculated enough to come up with the alpha wolf comparison in this scenario?
Also, as far
as, how smart is he? Do you think he's stupid? Because I'm granting him intelligence.
Also, as far as I understand it, the common misconception about alpha wolf and being subordinate, that's not how actual wolf packs work in reality. I've heard our understanding of that has changed in recent years, and they function more like family units, not in a we're fucking full house, whatever. No, there's still struggles and stuff within that group, but it's less one is necessarily the head, and there might still be a pecking
stratification
order, but it's not as black and white as he will make it seem.
By the way, he'll bring up the pecking order, and he spells the guy's name wrong in my copy of the book. I don't know if that got by editing. Anyway, he'll go on to discuss all that matters from a Darwinian perspective is permanence, and the dominance hierarchy, however social or cultural it might appear, has been around for some 500 million years. It's permanent. It's real. It's an argument from nature, again, implying that anything that is in fact natural is inherently virtuous or good or beneficial, which is not the case, considering this planet tries to kill us constantly, and he brings that up.
It's even a bad argument, because at the end of the day, you could literally point to any worldview and try and point to something in nature to try and back it up and say, that's why my worldview, for instance, should work. For instance, bees. Let's say I wanted to have a society which is very, very... I don't know. Let's say it's a monarchy with an absolute monarch at the top, but everyone functions together and works together. Let's say a communist society.
With a king?
Communist society bees. You know what I mean? And then I point to bees and say, they work together as not for the good of the individual, but for the good of the hive as a whole. Therefore, blah, 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 blah.
Therefore, communism is correct. Literally, you can do that.
It'd be pseudo-intellectual bullshit. It would mean nothing.
It would?
But the fact is, this is what Jordan Peterson is doing, just with a different example. It's actually interesting, too, because he actually goes in and says, if a dominant lobster is badly deflated, its brain basically dissolves. It then grows a new subordinate's brain, one more appropriate to its new lowly position. And then he has, his citation to a paper, and I actually went and read the paper. The paper doesn't say that.
What's the paper? That struck me as interesting, but you said before we started this that you wanted to deep dive into the lobster stuff, and I wanted to be surprised by your findings, so I didn't look up lobster biology.
I gotta look at the name of the paper. It's in the back real quick. That is from The Effects of Social Experience on Serotonergic Modulation of the Escape Circuit of Crayfish.
Crayfish,
Yes.
not lobster.
And
They're similar. I will grant that the crayfish are similar to lobsters, not lobsters.
They don't mention lobsters in the thing.
They don't mention lobsters
It's all
at all?
about crayfish.
Okay, he's very loose with his terminology
When he
in
says-
regards to lobsters. Define lobsters.
And when he says their brain basically melts,
He says dissolves,
dissolves.
sir.
It doesn't do that at fucking all. The paper doesn't say
what I thought.
that. It's literally just about what he talks about later, how you get into cycles of negatively perpetuated, negative reinforcement.
It's a
perpetuation.
metaphorical dissolves,
Right.
even though he's very implicitly and explicitly saying a physical dissolving of one's brain.
If a dominant lobster is badly defeated, its brain basically dissolves.
See, he used the word basically, so you'd be like, whoa.
It doesn't dissolve. The paper says nothing about all the paper talks about.
Now,
and I'm not gonna lie to you.
Right now, we're gonna be called pedantic for the record.
It's not pedantic.
That's what I'm saying! Like, he puts forth things as if they are factual, and when we say, no, those aren't factual, you'll go, oh, you're nitpicking. No! Motherfucker, later on in this book it says, speak precisely! So fucking do that!
He says its brain basically dissolves, when all the actual study says that temporarily what can happen, and sometimes if it's administered long enough, extra serotonin can cause long-term confidence boosts. The paper doesn't say that at all, by the way. Again, this is something I'm even steering into giving him too much credit when he talks about lobsters being confident. Serotonin, he talks about lobsters and how we both have serotonin, and if you were to give antidepressants to lobsters, it would boost their serotonin just like SSRIs do for human beings.
Is there a study based on the SSRIs given to lobsters?
In the study that I was actually talking about, they gave them serotonin stuff for that, which is a little different, I think, than an SSRI.
Because
They
it
were
was
giving
Prozac specifically.
But I believe they act similarly. But the point is that serotonin, just because we both use that as a neurotransmitter as animals, does not mean that an increase in levels for serotonin for a lobster specifically means the exact same thing for a higher level of serotonin.
I cannot believe you had to say that sentence
In
out
a
loud.
human.
It's driving me fucking crazy.
So, you can make broad generalizations, and yes, in science, we do probably assume that, yes, serotonin plays a role very similar in lobsters. It probably does make them a lobster equivalent of confident, if you can even say that. But we're talking about constructs and ideas that are so general and so vague and so watered down to the point when you're talking about them like this, you could be talking about anything. It just doesn't matter. It's bizarre. And the fact that he says things like, the brain basically dissolves, it creates a new subordinate brain. No, he's trying to just create this walls. He's trying to create these facts.
He understands that like people will go around, like Jordan Peterson fans, more likely than not, have repeated this line as if it were true.
Sure.
Like, did you know lobster brains dissolve if they're pussies? Don't be a pussy, your brains can dissolve, bitch. Like in some other term, I'm sure. I don't know. He goes on to say, we, the sovereign we, the we that has been around since the beginning of life, have lived in a dominance hierarchy for a long, long time. We were struggling for position before we had skin or hands or lungs or bones. There is little more natural than culture. Dominance hierarchies are older than trees. A couple things. First of all, I'd like to grant a little bit of respect for Jordan Peterson in regards to he believes evolution is real.
Yeah.
There's one. He's not conservative now, though.
I hate that he ends that statement, though, with dominance hierarchies are older than trees.
Okay, first of all, there's the
appeal to the natural.
He says this because lobsters are 500 billion years old, roughly, at least the common ancestors.
Million, you mean?
Million. Oh yeah, I just say billion.
Yeah.
500. Or half. He uses the phrase half a billion, so that's what was in my head. So yeah, 500 million trees that we know of today, specifically ones that bred basically from ferns, and they're moderately coniferous early trees, roughly 350 million years old. This implies a sort of idea of how, which you don't have fossil records because they're crustaceans, and so therefore you don't have their neurological pathways mapped. This implies that they haven't changed at all in 150 million years before the tree comes out, which is that is actually a nitpick, but it's sort of reinforcing this idea that even if it was older, it wouldn't have any... They're fucking lobsters. It wouldn't have any effect on how human society ought to operate. It's just how human society has operated before.
Sure.
We used to, I don't know, fucking hunt and gather. Is that better than farming?
And also
That implies, because hunting and gathering is older than farming, is that therefore the best way to live? Now, some may say yes, usually it's a vegan or something. But, like, probably not the hunting part. But I think we can all agree that based on both the fossil record and just how we live today, that farming and the agricultural revolution therein has led to more proliferation of human life, and we are at the top of the proverbial food pyramid, and because of that, you know what I'm saying?
Not only that, but when he talks
Just
about
the food chain, not the food pyramid. That's nutrition.
when he talks about the dominance hierarchy and how old it is, he also, again, with this dominance hierarchy, he talks about it as if it's this singular idea. But there are many different types of dominance hierarchies, and he talks about this a little later in the book. But not all dominance hierarchies are created equal either. When you're talking about the constructed hierarchies within human society, slavery, for instance, that's a dominance hierarchy structure. That's
Correct.
someone with power saying to someone who is at least relatively powerless and saying, you are going to do what I say, probably based upon either the threat of violence or some sort of negative consequences.
Sure. And
Otherwise,
like, and with the, if you extrapolate, I mean that means that slavery is correct because it mirrors the hierarchical nature of human beings and is therefore naturally true.
again, it's this weird idea that he's saying, it's in nature, it's in humans, ergo we should do nothing to change it, we should just do our best to live within it. No! What you should do is try and recognize when things might be based upon some sort of dominance hierarchy structure, and then make a value judgment as to whether or not that system is valuable in and of itself, and if it is not, you should do your best to try.
See, I think he is, and he decided that it was true, but I think the common... It's just conservative in nature, and he brings that. I mean, he calls evolution conservative in general earlier in the book, but I think he does that on purpose. You disagree with me a little bit.
I disagree.
I think because of the way he structures his paragraphs, it sounds like, hey, you know, that thing you disagreed with yesterday, I'm going to tell you why you should agree with it. But anyway,
I think you're
maybe,
really reaching.
Maybe, but anyways, but I think he agrees with this form because it happens to line up with his other conservative worldviews. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not true because it's been vetted. It's true because it lines up with his idea of what truth is, which is his experiences, which we talked about in the last episode. So if you missed it, go to that.
Sure.
But I just like, it doesn't seem informed by efficacy. It seems informed by how he perceives, like, what an ideal thing would be, not exactly in action. Does that make sense?
Sure, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So, this is us saying, I disagree. And something else we disagree with.
So, the chapter goes on, and there's an entire section which I'm going to read a lot of, and it's just called All the Girls, in which he then decides to take on, he talks a lot earlier about male dominance hierarchies and how they are how they are predicated on action, how they are predicated upon fighting amongst other males.
Being an alpha anti-cuck.
Right.
Without saying those words.
He does not believe the same of female dominance hierarchies,
No,
however.
he does not.
The female lobster, who also fight hard for territory during the...
He tries to grant them a little bit
know,
of
he does that.
like leeway, like saying, female lobsters are worth it.
Yep. During the maternal stages of their existence, identify the top guy quickly and become irresistibly attracted to him. This is brilliant strategy in my estimation. It's also one used by females of many different species, including humans. Instead of undertaking the computationally difficult task of identifying the best man, the females outsource the problem to the machine-like calculations of the dominance hierarchy. They let the males fight it out and peel their paramours from the top. This is very much what happens with stock market pricing, where the value of any particular enterprise is determined through competition of all. So, males, they fight with each other to decide who gets the best females. Females then wait and see who wins, and then decides based on their successfulness in the hierarchy.
Not based on emotions, thought. Like, there's no self involved in that. It's only external information. Like, there's no, like, what does a female want in a mate? What and frankly, what does the male look for in a mate, like, on a personal level? It only has to do with success, physical beauty, wealth, which you may tie to success, ability to reproduce.
Sure.
All of those things. Like, he goes on, I don't know if you're going to read this, but I'm going to read this. If you're male, you have preferential access to the best places to live and the highest quality of food. People compete to do you favors. You have limitless opportunity for romantic and sexual contact. You are a successful lobster, and the most desirable females line up and vie for your attention. And that is, of course, in the case of he uses the scale from 1 to 10.
Sure.
1 being a successful lobster person, 10 being a not successful lobster person. Saying that an unsuccessful number 10 lobster person would be someone who maybe has diseases and not a lot of money and slumps over and talks quietly and is meek. Stephen Hawking is like a 9 on that scale. You know what I'm saying? Like,
are you telling me Jordan Peterson's view of the world is somewhat simplistic and is not reflective of the reality in which we live?
Yeah, I can back that.
Okay.
Yeah.
This part I'm just going to read sensually because it's funny as fuck.
Okay.
When the females are ready to shed their shells and soften up a bit, they become interested in mating. They start hanging around the dominant lobster's pad, spraying attractive scents and aphrodisiacs toward him, trying to seduce him. His aggression has made him successful.
Me so horny.
So he's likely to react in a dominant, irritable manner.
I'm an alpha.
Furthermore, he's large, healthy, and powerful.
Girth.
It's no easy task to switch his attention from fighting to mating. If properly charmed, however, he will change his behavior towards the female.
Is this implication that maybe he'll punch a hoe?
Maybe, yep.
Okay.
This is the Lobster equivalent of 50 Shades of Grey, the fastest-selling paperback of all time, and the eternal Beauty and the Beast plot archetypal romance.
Cha-ching.
This is the pattern of behavior continually represented in their sexually explicit literary fantasies that are popular among women as provocative images of naked women among men. So the reason, women, you are into Beauty and the Beast stories, according to Jordan Peterson, is because men, successful men, are all very aggressive, and sometimes in their aggression, they'll smack a hoe, but evolutionarily, you're kind of attracted to that.
Can we talk about how he has not watched Beauty and the Beast? Because it is actually the antithesis of what he's saying is the story of Beauty and the Beast.
Lindsay Ellis actually has a really good video all about...
God, now we're feminazis.
I think it's specifically her video about monster boys, and you should watch this because it specifically talks about, and this ties into Jordan Peterson's obsession with myths. She specifically talks about the Beauty and the Beast myth and how its moral message has changed over time with society's views of marriage and women and how it's progressed and gotten better.
Yeah. Where it's not like a thing, like
Jordan
first version of this, Belle needed a husband.
Right.
And now it's like she fell in love and wants one.
There's a very big difference between the original text of Beauty and the Beast and the Disney version, for instance.
What's the real aggressive alpha male's name in that movie?
Gaston.
So Gaston, he gets the girl, right? Because he's successful, he's good looking. He stands up straight with his shoulders back. He has confidence.
He's the head of the dominance hierarchy in that small Parisian village.
He is literally number 1 on the scale. And Jordan Peterson, for some reason, invokes it nonetheless. Whereas the number 10, the literal, he's shamed. He's ugly. He's a beast. He's cursed. All the people around him, like, he's famously unliked. And is poor. He lives in a castle, sure, but only because people don't go there anymore and they didn't kick him out. He doesn't make any money, and he has nothing to offer but true love and well-meaning intentions. Jordan, my friend. Just shooting your lobster load in Bell is not going to work. How do you misunderstand Beauty and the Beast? How do you do it?
Anyway, in consequence, males who stay on top longer are those who form reciprocal coalitions with their lower status compatriots, and who pay careful attention to the troops' females and their infants. The political ploy of baby kissing is literally millions of years old, but lobsters are still comparatively primitive, so the bare plot elements of Beauty and the Beast suffice for them.
They don't. They don't at all. It's the opposite. Even the lobsters don't line up with that. God damn it. That's not how it works.
At the right moment, the male, now converted into a careful lover, deposits a packet of sperm into the appropriate receptacle.
Okay, by the way, I had a science book back in the day. An actual one, a bio book. And the definition for vagina in that book was receptacle for a penis. Did you have the same definition in your book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing! Do lobsters have vaginas?
Do they have cloacas? Are they like lizards? I know they're not
They
lizards.
have receptacles for sperm.
Oh, that makes sense. Afterward, after the sperm deposit.
It's almost like a sperm water balloon.
Yeah.
It just kind of happens to get inside a crevasse.
Afterward, the female hangs around and hardens up for a couple of weeks.
Oh, buddy.
Another phenomenon not entirely unknown to human beings.
Okay, he's using a metaphor of the shell hardening up because she has to be soft in order to be properly penetrated by the sperm cells in order to procreate, and then her shell hardening after that to protect her. He's making a joke about, haha, women, they get crazy when they have parasitic children in their wombs. Jordan.
Why is this relevant? For an amazing number of reasons. Apart from those that are comically obvious. First, we know that lobsters have been around in one form or another for more than 350 million years.
Invoking nature as a fallacy one more time.
This is a very long time. 65 million years ago, there were still dinosaurs. That is the unimaginatively distant past to us. To the lobsters, however, the dinosaurs were were the new rich. And he uses the French word because he's pretentious. Who appeared and disappeared in the flow of near-eternal time. That means that dominance hierarchies have been an essentially permanent fixture of the environment to which all complex life has adapted. A third of a billion years ago, brains and nervous systems were comparatively simple. Nonetheless, they already had the structure and neurochemistry.
But did they? You can't prove that.
I don't know.
Like the idea that, this could have popped up that many years ago. And I said it earlier, it would be no more or less. But the fact that he asserts that they had the same social structure that many years, it irritates me because he's invoking some sort of superiority due to old age.
Sure. This is something that really bugs me, by the way. He says, all that matters, from a Darwinian perspective, is the permanence and the dominance hierarchy. However, social or cultural, it might appear, has been around for 500 million years. It's permanent. It's real. He's said before, specifically, I know he has a quote where he says, from a Darwinian perspective, or from a Darwinian perspective, truth is that which allows you to procreate.
Yes. Are we going to talk about Sam Harris real quick in that debate? Because that's important.
We
for
can
this
if you want
context.
to, sure.
Okay, well, go ahead and we'll talk about the counter argument that Sam Harris makes at a certain point. Because, I agree with it. I don't agree with all of Sam Harris, but, that's very easy to
essentially, in this
argue.
This ties in with what we had said in the previous chapter when he's talking about reality and its flexibility. And reality is essentially what collectively people believe, or enough people believe. In that specific instance, he was talking about things that help you survive, survival of the fittest, are true evolutionarily. This is, again, an instance of him bastardizing the word true or the word reality to mean something else than what they mean, to muddy the argument and make it a more difficult conversation to have.
Yeah, and he did this with Sam Harris, where basically the premise he put forth was a wife cheating or whatever. Sure. And Sam Harris comes up and says, okay, if a man finds out his wife is cheating, and kills himself due to the obvious fact that that is true, and he goes through a few examples, but if a man knows for a fact it is definitely true his wife is cheating, he could see her, he could stand in the doorway, and then he kills himself, under your definition that's no longer true because it doesn't help him survive. He actually killed himself due to something that was true. So in that case, is it true or not? And Jordan Peterson kind of waffles.
Sure.
How, like, clearly it's true.
That's why his definitions of truth are not useful
They're
definitions.
not tenable at all.
Because something that could be, for instance, beneficial, I'm not the first person to bring this up, but two people could have two competing religious views that both help them survive because for some reason maybe it adds some sort of feeling of value to their life, whatever. Sure. It makes them more likely to live out the rest of their days and procreate. But the two beliefs can be, what's the word I'm looking for?
In conflict?
They're in conflict, yeah. For instance, you could have someone who is Christian and someone who is Muslim. Their ideas are in conflict. They can't both be right, but both could theoretically help them survive for some reason. Does that make sense?
That's why especially in communities that is largely Islamic or largely Christian, it would help you survive to not be burnt at the stake or beheaded.
Sure. So,
in the Middle Ages.
This is a demonstrably true point where you can point to it and say, look, these two things help both of these people survive, but that doesn't make the thing true. This is why the definition of the word true is not what Jordan Peterson continually says it to be. It's bizarre. The dominance hierarchy is not capitalism. It's not communism either, for that matter. It's not the military-industrial complex. It's not the patriarchy, that disposable, malleable, arbitrary cultural artifact. It's not even a human creation, not in the most profound sense. It is instead a near-eternal aspect of the environment, and much of what is blamed on these more ephemeral manifestations is a consequence of its unchanging existence. This specifically jumped out to me the most this chapter as if you're an anti-SJW type, you're gonna latch onto that paragraph. Specifically because it frames the world in a, listen, bucko, the world is a shitty place, but this is how it's always been, it's how it's always gonna be, so you better shut the fuck up and deal with it like a man, otherwise...
He also, he goes out of his way to mention the patriarchy as disposable, malleable.
I know. I was going to get into that because I think it specifically allows an out for people who maybe hear about people saying, like, hey, I'm a person of color, and society doesn't really seem like it's a very fair place to me. Yeah. It allows them to say, of course it's not a fair place. Dominance hierarchy.
It's not fair to me.
It's not fair to me. It's not fair to anyone. It allows you to, anytime anyone brings up any sort of injustice in the world, to say, so the fuck what?
Yeah, and the idea, and I know people that have that actual thought process where I may say, oh, I don't know, like women should have rights to reproductive care and like, prophylactics, whatever, birth control. And they might say, yeah, but men can't get abortions, so why should women? Like, that's not the fucking, we're not talking about that. And there's this, I know you're disagreeing with me because he uses the word conservative in several places around this paragraph. And that's why I think it was on purpose.
I think that's a bit of a stretch.
It might be, but he constantly drops in stuff like patriarchy. Oh, by the way, that's bullshit. He'll drop in, feminist. Bullshit. Conservatism's good. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I think it's use of, I'm not going to say the word subliminal. I think it's using those words on purpose.
It's good marketing.
It is. It's not. He's not saying conservatism is good. What he's saying is something that is conservative is good.
You're right in that, because again, he talks about, it's an appeal to the natural. He specifically is talking about evolution in that case. Evolution is by definition a conservative process.
Correct.
I could understand that.
You know what I'm saying? He's framing things, he's using these words specifically because by the end of the thing, you have been seeded with all of these thoughts. Oh, evolution's conservative. Okay, fine, fuck it. I disagree, but maybe not. And then later on by the end, you as probably a conservative or leaning centrist conservative, you watch Dave Rubin, you like Ben Shapiro, I know who you are, and you agree at the end because all of these things sound reasonable.
Sure.
Because it's not outright saying you should be a conservative Christian white male. that punches other dudes in the face when we have disagreements, and you should get the woman you deserve them.
Right.
He's not saying that.
What he's saying is there is a dominance hierarchy, and certainly our society tends to place white men on the top of that hierarchy. Wink, 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 nudge, nudge. The hierarchy is good, by the way.
Ugh. I need a shrink.
Speaking of which... So something that is brought up several times in this chapter, a lot of his ideas, and I know you said specifically he's a behavioral psychologist, so this makes sense. But he's
worked in the field. He brings up his clinical cases. He brings it up.
A lot of what he talks about feels like such a bastardization of cognitive behavioral therapy. And for instance, let me just give you a little example. There are many systems of interaction between brain, body, and social world that can get caught up in positive feedback loops. Depressed people, for example, can start feeling useless and burdensome, as well as grief-stricken and pained. This makes them withdraw from the contact with friends and family. Then the withdrawal makes them even more lonesome and isolated, and more likely to feel useless and burdensome. Then they withdraw more, and in this manner depression spirals and amplifies. Now this is a classic negative feedback loop. You see this in behavioral therapy all the time, very much as he described. The problem is the way he's framing the world and the way to judge yourself in this dominance hierarchy structure is like the opposite of in cognitive behavioral therapy what you're actually supposed to be doing. And that is trying to... And he pays lip service to this a little bit. In the book, even, he says, like, you shouldn't compare yourself to others. You should compare yourself to yourself yesterday, which he didn't come up with. I know I've heard that before. And that's true, but you can't do that while also praising and saying things are natural and good in dominance hierarchy structures.
The problem here is, while he's framing it in a own it, you are you... you have to handle your own problems, but at the same exact time, also there's scapegoats over there that we can blame.
Yeah.
And that's the issue with this. I don't know how... he got his degree years ago. I think it was in the 80s, maybe in the 90s.
Sure.
And so a lot of his positions are outdated. Like, I don't even know... I don't know how prevalent this was in the 80s. I'm not a behavioral psychologist. You're more on the psychology end of this than I am. But even so, I can see problems with... Like, for instance, are you going to bring up the agoraphobia? Can we talk about that now?
Okay.
So let's talk about agoraphobia for a bit. Let me read a little excerpt to kind of frame how he's talking about it. So he talks about how agoraphobia is a thing. It's the fear of basically outside influences on yourself, and it doesn't necessarily have to be going outside. It can also occur in your house. It's just basically just consuming anxiety for a lot of things. But quote, the sufferer is typically a middle-aged woman who has been too dependent on other people. Perhaps she went immediately from over-reliance on her father to a relationship with an older and comparatively dominant boyfriend or husband with little or no break for independent existence. I looked this up. He's not wrong when he says most people that experience agoraphobia are female.
Yeah.
But what that implies, and I know he would disagree with this, it implies, colloquially speaking, like a pretty decent majority of women. 0.9% of women and 0.8% of men experience agoraphobia across the spectrum. So most people are 45 to 59, which is middle age. So he extrapolated that. But the rest of that, the part where he talks about they're just too dependent on other people, they jumped from husband to boyfriend, they were relying on that has no statistical data to back it up whatsoever. What it's doing is showing a woman's necessity of men. And like, it doesn't, like, do you think there's no lesbians that fucking experience this? That don't have, he doesn't talk about the men who experience agoraphobia either. It's this idea that, like, there's some sort of inherent weakness in women, and I know that he will disagree with me because he grants them with little or no break for independent existence. Like, independent existence, now that's what women need. But not really, because he wants you to fucking get married and have kids. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it's frustrating.
Something else I find interesting, he says, if you say no early in the cycle of oppression, and you mean what you say, which means you state your refusal in no uncertain terms and stand behind it, then the scope for oppression on the part of the oppressor will remain properly bounded and limited. The forces of tyranny expand inexorably to fill the space made available for their existence. People who refuse to muster approximately self-protective territorial responses are laid open to exploitation as much as those who genuinely can't stand up for their own rights because of the more essential inability or true imbalance of power. Again, the idea of telling people without power or people who are oppressed to stand up for themselves in and of itself is a good thing. But the people he's targeting this message to are people who are like, not saying, yeah, we're gonna stop those oppressors. They're saying, yeah, we're gonna stop those oppressive feminist, trans rights.
Well, it's not stop it. It's don't become the oppressor.
I don't even think it's that.
But it is.
I think it's a way. I think it's.
He describes his power couple.
I feel as though it's inviting the audience to feel victimized. It's inviting the audience to feel as though they're being victimized by the SJWs.
But how do you stop being victimized? You become a number one on the scale, and he mentions, if you're male, you live in the best places, have good food, you get all the sexual companions you want. Yep. If you're female, you have access to high-quality suitors, tall, strong, and symmetrical, creative, reliable, honest, and generous. All the things the reader is, of course. And, like your dominant male counterpart, which is an amazing sentence, you will compete ferociously, even pitilessly, to maintain or improve your position in the equally competitive female mating hierarchy. Although you are less likely to use physical aggression to do so, there are many effective verbal tricks and strategies at your disposal, including the disparaging of opponents, and you may well be expert at their use. Men and women experience things different. Men will punch you in the face. Women, they're so catty. You know what I mean? Like, he's talking about the ideal two number ones together on his scale would indeed oppress others in his own words. That's his ideal in this situation. That's the best possible scenario, is you are two dominant people. Of course the females aren't as dominant as the men, but you're more dominant male, you're as most dominant female as you can get, dominating others.
Let me read 2 sections real quick. This is from a section called Rising Up, by the way. It also happens to people who have decided for one reason or another that all forms of aggression, including feelings of anger, are morally wrong. I have seen people with a particularly acute sensitivity to petty tyranny and over-aggressive competitiveness restrict themselves all emotions that might give rise to such things. Often they are people whose fathers were excessively angry and controlling. Psychological forces are never unidimensional in their value. However, and the truly appalling potential of anger and aggression to produce cruelty and mayhem are balanced by the ability of those primordial forces to push back against oppression, speak truth, and to motivate resolute movement forward in times of strife, uncertainty, and danger. And then later he says, to say it again, there is little difference between the capacity for mayhem and destruction, ingrained and the strength of character. This is one of the most difficult lessons in life.
So, basically, like, being oppressed and experiencing strife and mistreatment is a good thing. And to a degree, I think everyone experiences these things and is good. For instance, I think that's what someone in, like, a homeschooled situation will miss out on, socially speaking, instead of being publicly schooled. Now, there's some social things that you might not pick up on. But in the middle of those sections that you just read is the following text. Such individuals typically come from hyper-sheltered families where nothing terrible is allowed to exist and everything is fairyland wonderful, or else. Like a snowflake. What he's framing this about is, no, you are tough and you understand that facts don't care about your fee-fees. And the snowflakes, they're the problem. Because they're the ones that want us to be nice. They're the ones that want us to use proper pronouns. I mean preferred. I said proper. Because, like, sure, there is value in dealing with adversity at times. It teaches you how to cope. Like, the first time you got broken up with in high school or something, it was probably the end of the world. And when you're an adult, it's not a big deal anymore because you understand it's not the end of the world.
Sure.
So that is a good thing. I think if a person is 50 years old and goes through a divorce, it could fuck them. Mm-hmm. It could totally ruin them because there's more at stake, which is why, relationships are good. But not in the way he's talking. It's not good for an adult person, say a trans person. I know he's not talking about trans issues right now, but I'm going to bring it up. For a trans person to constantly be alienated by their peers due to the fact that they feel out of place in the lane in which society has said they ought to stay in as far as their gender is concerned. Does that make sense? So it's not healthy all the time. It's not healthy most of the time.
I'm going to repeat this just because it concerns me.
Yeah.
To say it again, that's a quote. To say it again, there is very little difference between the capacity for mayhem and destruction, integrated, and the strength of character. It concerns me that it seems to me he's setting up people, white anti-SJW young men who feel alienated for one reason or another.
That's his target audience, and I mean that's obvious. But that's not to say that there's not gay women, whatever, or any other demographic liking this book.
Regardless of who it is, but that demographic in particular, it seems to me he's setting them up to fail very much so. If he's saying, don't get me wrong, anger can be a motivating factor.
Sure.
If channeled,
Michael Jordan.
But when you're the kind of person who goes around yelling cultural Marxism about everything, and
you're all Goebbels,
and you lie about bills and shit to get attention, you're not the victim that needs to use anger to get things done. You're the asshole who's using your frustration and anger to make life more difficult for other people.
Also, couple this with, like, what truth is something that allows us to be better. Like the fake news stuff. Like, you couple that with his clear demographic of more right-leaning folks, it kind of breeds and continues to kind of be the catalyst for this new breed of right-wing politics where we see, like, this thing's fake, but it gets the message out there that we disagree with something else.
What he would call
it's a
metaphorical truth.
Metaphorical truth.
Or as I like to call it, a lie.
A lie, a big one. So, I don't know, maybe just because it's coming up in the news recently, again, is Pizzagate, for instance. Now, I'm not saying that Jordan Peterson fans believe in Pizzagate. I'm saying that this type of mindset is what leads to that kind of outrage. A guy shot a gun in the pizza place because he was being aggressive and going on a rescue mission because he believed things that were true according to alpha males that take brain force pills. Does that make sense? Now, I will say, I'd rather hang out with Jordan Peterson than Alex Jones, but only by a slim margin and only if I didn't feel like wanting to get fucked up, because then that swaps and I want to go hang out with Alex.
That's fair.
Time for dinner. Sometimes it is known as the Matthew Principle, Matthew 25:29, of the Bible, derived from what might be the harshest statement ever attributed to Christ. To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. You truly know you are the Son of God, capitalized, when your dicta apply even to crustaceans. Do you know what lobster thermidor is? Lobster thermidor is, if you don't know, you take often the tail meat, but it could be the claw meat or whatever. It could be just all the meat of a lobster. Sure. You cut it up. You add some egg yolk to it. You add some brandy to it. You bake it in the open shell of a lobster, sometimes paired with some grilled Gruyere. Totally delicious. He just can't help but chop up his little pieces of faith and stuff it into the shell of this book whenever he sees fit invoking Jesus. I literally was not looking for religious stuff in this, and it happened anyway. It's not even implicit, it's explicit searching for religious allegory, and he calls Jesus the actual Son of God, and you know you are the Son of God when your dicta applies even to crustaceans, implying this sort of pervasive, worldly, beyond human comprehension knowledge of the character Jesus Christ from the New Testament of the Bible. Am I crazy here?
But standing up straight with your shoulders back is not something that is only physical, because you're not only a body, you're a spirit, so to speak, a psyche as well. Standing up physically also implies and invokes and demands standing up metaphysically. Standing up means voluntarily acceptance, the burden of being.
Being with a capital B.
Again, he's the fucking I'm not the Christian Deepak Chopra.
He is. It's just, I mean, that's what it is. He's going on to say that basically, now he'll talk about the physical, like literally right after that, he mentions that your nervous system responds when you smile, when you frown, and shit like that. But, and that's true limitedly, but it is true. Yes. But he's saying, in no uncertain terms, standing up straight with your shoulders back and being confident will embolden you spiritually. It will help you. Your spirit, you know, the one that Jesus, Son of God, capitalized, says you have. And I mean, it doesn't stop here. The next thing is to stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open. It means deciding to voluntarily transform the chaos of potential into the realities of habitable order. It means adopting the burden of self-conscious vulnerability and accepting the end of the unconscious paradise of childhood where finitude and mortality are only dimly comprehended. It means willingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary to generate a productive... It means willingly undertaking the sacrifices necessary to generate a productive and meaningful reality. It means acting to please God in the ancient language. That's a quote. It means to please God. And he says, in the ancient language. This whole section is him imparting God's knowledge, biblical thought, and not like spiritual, not using historical context to explain ideas. He's not using an allegory based on Jesus and John the Baptist for broship. I have no idea. But he's actually talking about spiritual growth through action, and that being a way to enhance your standing not only in the real world, the true world, your capital B being, but also in the eyes of God. You know, the Bible God.
To stand up straight with your shoulders back means building the ark that protects the world from the flood, guiding your people through the desert after they have escaped tyranny, making your way away from comfortable home and country, and speaking the prophetic word to those who ignore the widows and children. It means shouldering the cross that marks the X. Remember, in the introduction he was talking about Jesus on the cross marking X. The place where human being intersect so terribly. And again,
it's overt.
PewDiePie read this and didn't realize he was religious.
Again, I'm gonna give him 2 outs. Number 1, he's PewDiePie. The expectation there is not high. Number 2, he's from Sweden. They're not that religious. Not a book reviewer. That's 3.
It was during a book review.
He's not a book reviewer. I'm just saying he tried once and he did a bad job.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't know. PewDiePie is neutral to me. But he goes on, so attend carefully to your posture, quit drooping and hunching around, speak your mind, put your desires forward as if you had a right to them, at least the same right as others. All speech is equal. All ideas deserve a table at the marketplace. Walk tall and gaze forthrightly ahead. Dare to be dangerous. Encourage the serotonin to flow plentifully through the neural pathways desperate for its calming influence. Be It feels good to be an asshole, man. It feels good. And you know what's going to happen? Jesus.
That appears to be what he's going for. I don't know, man. Thus emboldened, you will embark on the voyage of your life. Let your light shine.
Didn't Katy Perry talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So to speak, on the heavenly hill, and pursue your rightful destiny. Then, your rightful destiny.
Literally, he's framing everyone who reads this book and takes his advice as sort of a Jesus figure.
Then, remember everyone, if you feel like life hasn't given you the things you deserve, fuck everyone else as much as you can, because you deserve them. Anyway. Then the meaning of your life may be sufficient to keep the corrupting influence of mortal despair at bay. Then you may be able to accept the terrible burden of the world and find joy. Look for your inspiration to the victorious lobster with its 350 million years of practical wisdom. Stand up straight with your shoulders back.
You gotta snap it shut now for dramatic effect. There we go. So,
I don't know if,
wisdom from lobsters. Lobster wisdom.
they're delicious.
They look like they have mustaches, so they're wise. Beards are bigger than mustaches. So are we more wise? I don't know how that works.
The next chapter, by the way, is the opposite of the Golden Rule chapter. Treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping.
Yeah.
That'll be a fun one.
Yeah, so we might do a follow. I like doing the follow-ups to these.
Not necessarily after every video, but every couple.
But
maybe.
I'm wondering if. See, the problem is, I think we're going to get a lot of interesting comments, so maybe we'll do a follow-up. I'm not promising it, but maybe we'll do a follow-up if, there's probably going to be a little bit of a bitch to be had down there, because we're taking him out of context or something.
You can read the book. I think our...
Yeah, you can read more. I mean, he goes on. He expands on this in a talk. I forget with it who it was with. It doesn't matter. Or maybe it does because I'm taking him out of context and I'm not reading exactly his words out of his own. But wait, and he describes how, kind of using this lobster metaphor without invoking the word lobster, men are more likely to end something in violence. He goes through the steps of how lobsters interact with one another that we didn't talk about, where step one is like, some posturing and whatever, and if if one doesn't back down, then they'll shoot their juices out and they'll say like, oh, like we have a lot of important information in the pheromones or whatever, allow the lobster to detect stuff, and it goes on and it escalates finally to actual physical combat. And Jordan Peterson says it's easier to talk with another man and have a disagreement because we know that at the end, physical violence is an option we can explore. But I'm not making this up. But with a woman, it's not a thing we do. We don't punch women. And so when we are at the mercy of women because we are not allowed to punch them in regards to arguments. I'm not making that up. I can go search for the actual quote. It'll be in the description if you want to read that interview. I don't know, man. How the fuck do you eat this up, guys?
He definitely walked in on like his girlfriend sucking off the whole football team.
He definitely got cheated on, and I mean that's not a good feeling. But like that can't imply. I don't know, just like your whole life.
I shouldn't even say that. That's not even fair of me to say.
Maybe he didn't get cheated on.
I'm putting his assholishness on someone else as if it's someone else's fault. You know what, Jordan Peterson, you're just an asshole.
Stand up straight with your shoulders back and own it. So, next time we'll be talking about how to treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
Treat yourself. So if you have any comments, I'd love to see them. Most likely, like there's a 5% chance I want to read your comment. So, if you did like it, give it a thumbs up and share it with someone you think will enjoy it. Or someone that won't enjoy it. Actually, both of those. Share it on Facebook. We'll get a lot of downvotes if you share it on Facebook. It's just a hive. It's a beehive of just B. Peterson fans. Facebook is his beehive. There we go. You could also, if you want to bitch at one of us in more real time, Papa Bird Jake on Twitter or Hugo Reloaded on Twitter. I'll probably engage with you more than he will. I have a lower threshold for what I determine valuable of my time.
Accurate.
Yeah.
If you want, you can always donate to our Patreon if you want to help support the show. We have a P.O. box where you can send us books or movies.
Please don't send us 12 rules, because we already have it.
We have it.
Yeah. You can send us, I said mirrors of meaning, and you didn't correct me when you were editing the video, which is I have your back when I edit. So I'm gonna look out for anything. I'm gonna get you back. But yeah, I meant maps of meaning, and people were like, you don't even know the book. I was like, nah, I do. I just said it wrong, which is fine. But you can send us maps of meaning if you'd like. I won't read it.
I will.
See, the problem with that is I've read excerpts. It's basically he tried really like he even admits it's bad to read. Like it's hard read. It's rife with his floppy language. Which, by the way, later on he's going to say, like, speak very clearly. I have probably a more interesting take on that than you might imagine. But I'd rather watch one of his lectures and be mad at that instead. It's just, I think it's a quicker thing for me because it's kind of just his lecture series truncated, and he tries really hard to describe it. It's bad.
Sure.
So
that's it.
I love you.
Until next time, I'm Hugo.
I'm Jake.
This has been Hugo and Jake.
I'm probably going to make lobster thermidor, though. Like, it sounds super good.
I'll eat some.
Are you not? Are you into lobster?
Yeah. I have to wait to eat after you, though, because I'm down in the pecking order of
That's
the
right.
dominance hierarchy.
That's right.
Wait off to the side till he's done and I get the scraps.
Yeah. And then my girlfriend can lick the shells.
I don't.
You want to lick some shells, bitch?
I'm breaking up with you.
More for me.